Central Sub 117 scene is secured at a Whiskey Fox, Whiskey Mike, both gunshot wounds to the head.
Sir, I want to let you know because of the scene, I did go get a gun and bring it down here.
It's in your vehicle? Do you have any guns on you at all?
No, sir. It's leaning up against the side of my car.
Okay. You're fine, man. You're fine. Turn around for me.
I don't have any guns.
Okay. Yes, sir. I see that. Okay. This is your wife and son?
And son.
Okay.
It's bad. It's bad. Check the pulses.
Yes, sir. This is the firearm you brought from inside the house?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I went and got. This is a long story. My son was in a boat wreck a few months back. He's been getting threats. Most of it's been benign stuff we didn't take serious.
Okay.
You know, he's been getting like punched. I know that's somebody. I know that's what it is.
Okay. When did you get home? Right when you called, or did you go to the house first? Where is the house?
I came to the house first. My mom has late stages Alzheimer's, and my dad is in the hospital.
Okay.
I left. I don't know what time. I can go back on my phone and tell you the exact times. Did you check?
Okay. Did I check what?
Did you check them?
We got medical guys that are. That's what they're gonna do. Okay.
What are they doing? Can they hurry?
They are. Yes, sir. That gentleman that was out here already. He's one of the battalion chiefs. Okay. How did you pull up? You from back there?
I went to the house and they weren't home, which was odd. I tried to call.
Okay.
And then I knew they had been down here before I left to go to my mom's.
Okay.
And so that is loaded.
Okay.
You might want to unload it. But I mean.
Is this the only firearm with you? This is the only one, or is there any more in the truck?
I believe that's it.
You think that's the only one? Okay.
I'm 99%.
Do you normally
sure
have any other firearms in your vehicle?
I don't, but occasionally occasionally there's a pistol in there.
Okay. Just wait right here for me for a second, okay?
Central House.
Copy. Kill your front lights, I can't see.
653 outside.
Enjoy it, sir.
Yeah, well, I've already spoken with Captain Deal. He's got crime scene. He's contacted them. He's also going to give us the assistance of a couple of field agents.
Roger that.
I'm even checking. They're
8 to
dead.
10 out.
They are dead, aren't
I
they?
just turned on those.
Yes, sir. That's what it looks like.
Randy. He's all dead. Where are you now?
Most people believe they already know the Murdaugh story. They've seen the headlines. They've watched the documentaries. They've heard about the murders, the trial, and the verdict. But what if that version of the case only tells half the story? Because while cameras focused on courtroom drama and shocking revelations, other details quietly remained in the background, buried inside court filings, glossed over in timelines, or never fully explored at all. Pieces of evidence that didn't fit neatly into a headline. Scandals that surfaced briefly, then disappeared. Patterns that only become visible when you stop looking at events in isolation and start connecting everything. This video is not a recap of the Murdaugh murders. It's not another retelling of what everyone has already seen. This is about the parts of the case that weren't emphasized. The information that existed in public records, but never truly entered the public conversation. The warning signs that appeared years before the murders. And the deeper story that only emerges when financial crimes, civil lawsuits, insurance settlements, and institutional influence are examined together. Because when you step back far enough, the Murdaugh case begins to look less like a single tragedy and more like a long, unfolding pattern that went unnoticed for far too long. So here's the question that changes everything. What if the most important parts of this case were never the murders themselves? Welcome to Dark Crime Case Files, where no crime stays in the dark. To understand what this case really represents, we have to step away from the version most people were shown. Because this story isn't just about a powerful family or a shocking crime scene. It's about what happens when influence lasts so long that it stops being questioned. When warning signs appear quietly, in paperwork, in settlements, in civil filings, long before they ever appear on the news. In this documentary, we're going beyond the surface. Not speculation, not rumors, but information was drawn from public records, court documents, and reporting that existed in plain sight, yet was rarely examined together. You're about to see how certain details were minimized, how some scandals never received sustained attention, and how events that seemed unrelated at the time begin to form a much clearer picture when placed side by side. Financial misconduct that predates the murders. Civil cases that revealed pressure points long before criminal charges. Institutional blind spots that allowed patterns to continue without challenge. This isn't about rewriting history. It's about completing it. And to be clear, I'm not an investigator or a legal professional. Nothing here is meant to accuse or convict anyone. This video exists to educate, to connect publicly available information, and to ask the questions that naturally arise when facts are viewed together instead of in isolation. Because once you remove the noise, once you step away from headlines and focus on the documents themselves, a different narrative begins to emerge, one that explains not just what happened, but how it was able to happen at all. And to see that clearly, we have to go back, not to retell the story you already know, but to isolate the moments that mattered most long before anyone was watching. To understand the secrets that stayed hidden, we need just enough context, not to retell the story, but to frame what comes next. For nearly a century, the Murdaugh name carried weight in South Carolina's Lowcountry. Generation after generation served as powerful legal figures, shaping courtrooms, influencing outcomes, and building a reputation that blurred the line between public service and private power. Their presence wasn't just respected, it was expected. At the center of this modern chapter was Alex Murdaugh, a well-connected attorney whose life appeared stable from the outside. He lived on a sprawling hunting estate known as Moselle with his wife, Maggie, and their two sons, Paul and Buster. To many, the family represented success, tradition, and authority. But beneath that image, pressure was building. By 2019, the family's world began to crack. A late-night boat crash involving Paul Murdaugh resulted in the death of a young woman named Mallory Beach. Lawsuits followed. Public scrutiny intensified. And for the first time, the family's influence faced open resistance. Behind the scenes, financial questions were already forming. Questions that had nothing to do with headlines but everything to do with records, settlements, and money that didn't end up where it should have. Then, in June of 2021, Maggie and Paul Murdaugh were found dead on the Moselle property. The murders shocked the nation. The focus shifted instantly to crime scenes, suspects, and trials. Cameras rolled. Narratives hardened. And while the world watched the most dramatic chapter unfold, earlier warning signs faded quietly into the background.
They are dead, aren't
I
they?
just turn on those.
Yes, sir. That's what it looks like.
Randy. Maggie's all are dead. Where are you now? All right. Yeah, the police are here now. The police are here now.
Affirmative.
That's my brother.
Okay. When was the last time you were here with them? Or talked to them or anything like that?
It was earlier tonight. I don't know the exact time, but
Okay.
I left. I was probably gone an hour and a half from my mom's, and I saw them about 45 minutes before that.
Okay.
I rode around with Paul for 2 hours this afternoon in the pickup truck.
That's your son, Paul? Okay.
Somebody going to check them?
Yes, sir. They've already checked them.
They did check them?
Yes, sir.
It's official that they're dead?
Yes, sir. That's what it looks like.
I'm sorry.
No. You're fine. Just
I'm very sorry. Gotta call her parents.
Football thing.
What's her name?
Her name is Maggie Murdaugh. Margaret Brandstetter Murdaugh. How you doing?
What's her birthday?
9/15/68.
Okay, and what's your son's first name? You said Paul?
Paul Terry Murdaugh.
And what's his birthday?
Jason, do you have anybody
4.
coming through town that could stop and pick up that tent I see lighting off in the distance?
What are they covering them up?
I got some getting dressed now, Sheriff. I'll have somebody stop and grab it.
Tell them they don't have to do that.
This video is about those signs. Because when you remove the emotional weight of the murders for just a moment and examine what came before them, a different story starts to surface. One that explains why the collapse wasn't sudden, but inevitable. And it begins with the cracks that appeared long before anyone imagined how this would end. When the murders became the center of public attention, one word dominated nearly every discussion: timeline. What the public saw was a simplified version, a compressed sequence of events designed to be understood quickly. But inside the case files, the timelines were far more complex, layered with digital data that raised quiet questions long before they became headlines. Phone records, vehicle data, message activity, location pings. Each piece on its own seemed ordinary, but when viewed together, they revealed how narrow the margin of time actually was, and how much depended on minutes, not hours. One of the least discussed elements in mainstream coverage was how digital evidence doesn't always speak clearly. Phones record movement, not intent. Data shows activity, not context. And yet, during the investigation and trial, certain digital moments carried enormous weight, while others received little public explanation at all. Some timestamps were emphasized repeatedly, others were acknowledged briefly, then moved past. And that imbalance shaped how the story was understood. What many documentaries didn't explore was why digital evidence became so central in this case, not just because of what it showed, but because of what it couldn't definitively explain on its own. Gaps in activity, overlapping windows, human behavior that doesn't always align neatly with data points. This is not about disputing outcomes. It's about recognizing that timelines, especially digital ones, are interpretive by nature, and that interpretation often depends on what else is happening behind the scenes. Because while investigators focused on reconstructing moments, something else was quietly unfolding in parallel. A financial reality that would soon demand attention, regardless of how the timeline was interpreted. And that brings us to the part of the story that existed long before the murders, but didn't fully come into focus until afterward. Long before the murders drew national attention, another crisis was already unfolding, one that didn't involve crime scenes or flashing lights, but spreadsheets, settlement checks, and missing money. What many people don't realize is that financial pressure didn't follow the murders. It preceded them. Court records later revealed a pattern of financial misconduct stretching back years. Client settlements that never reached their intended recipients. Funds that were rerouted, delayed, or quietly absorbed. On paper, everything looked legitimate, until it didn't. Inside the law firm where Alex Murdaugh worked, trust accounts were expected to be untouchable. They existed to protect vulnerable clients at their most difficult moments. But according to investigations, those safeguards failed, not once, but repeatedly. What's often missing from mainstream retellings is how long these irregularities went unnoticed and how dependent the system was on trust. Trust in a name, in a legacy, in a reputation that discouraged scrutiny. As financial strain mounted, so did the risks. Civil lawsuits from the boat crash threatened to expose financial records. Depositions loomed. Discovery requests pressed closer. And with each new filing, the possibility of deeper exposure grew. This wasn't a sudden collapse. It was a slow tightening. And yet, for a long time, these warning signs existed almost entirely outside public awareness. There were no press conferences. No breaking news banners. Just documents moving quietly through the system, waiting for someone to look closely enough. Because when financial misconduct goes unchecked for years, it doesn't simply disappear. It compounds. And in this case, those unresolved financial questions would soon collide with another tragedy, one that initially appeared isolated but would later become impossible to ignore. Years before the Murdaugh name dominated national headlines, there was another case tied quietly to the Moselle estate, one that initially drew little attention and, for a long time, raised few public questions. Gloria Satterfield had worked for the Murdaugh family for decades. She was a familiar presence in the household, trusted, long-serving, and deeply connected to the family's daily life. In 2018, she died following what was described at the time as an accident at the property. The incident was presented as straightforward. There was no criminal investigation, no immediate controversy, and for years, the case remained largely unknown outside legal filings. But as financial investigations expanded years later, this story resurfaced, and when it did, it looked very different. Court documents revealed that a significant insurance settlement had been reached in connection with Gloria Satterfield's death. The purpose of that settlement was clear: to provide financial support to her surviving family. But according to prosecutors and investigators, that money never reached them. Instead, it became part of a larger financial pattern, one that mirrored other irregularities now under scrutiny. What once appeared to be an isolated incident began to resemble something else entirely, another moment where trust, access, and opportunity intersected without oversight. What makes this case especially troubling isn't just the financial outcome, it's how easily it disappeared from view. No media attention, no sustained questioning, no public accountability for years. And that silence matters. Because when a system allows certain events to pass without examination, it creates space for repetition. Not necessarily through intent, but through absence of consequence. The Satterfield case would eventually become one of the clearest examples of how deeply embedded the problems had become. Not dramatic, not sensational, but quietly devastating. And it wouldn't be the last time that civil proceedings, not criminal ones, would reveal truths the public hadn't been shown. By the time the boat crash entered public conversation, it was already being framed as a tragic accident with criminal implications. But inside civil court filings, the story was unfolding very differently, slower, deeper, and far more revealing. In 2019, a late-night boat crash involving Paul Murdaugh resulted in the death of Mallory Beach. The immediate focus was on responsibility, intoxication, and criminal charges. But while the criminal case captured attention, the civil lawsuits moved quietly, and that's where some of the most important pressure points emerged. Civil discovery doesn't seek punishment. It seeks information. Depositions, insurance claims, and financial disclosures became unavoidable. Lawyers weren't just asking what happened that night. They were asking how assets were structured, how policies were written, and how money moved behind the scenes. And with each request, the risk of exposure increased. What rarely made headlines was how close these proceedings came to opening financial records that had never faced real scrutiny before. Settlement negotiations revealed insurance complexities. Statements under oath created permanent records. And suddenly, long-standing assumptions about transparency were no longer safe. This is where the boat crash becomes more than a tragic event. It becomes a catalyst. Because for the first time, the family's financial world was being examined by people with no reason to look away. No loyalty, no history, just questions and the legal right to demand answers. The timing mattered. As civil pressure mounted, financial irregularities were becoming harder to contain. And when systems built on reputation encounter forced transparency, the result is often instability. The boat crash didn't just damage public perception. It accelerated scrutiny. And that acceleration would soon expose something far larger. Not a single scandal, but a structure that had gone unquestioned for decades. By this point in the story, a pattern begins to emerge, not just in actions, but in absence. For decades, the Murdaugh family operated inside a system where relationships overlapped. Legal professionals became neighbors. Colleagues became friends. Influence moved quietly, not through explicit corruption, but through familiarity and trust that rarely faced challenge. This doesn't require conspiracy to function. It requires comfort. When the same names appear repeatedly in courtrooms, firms, and filings, scrutiny naturally softens. Questions feel unnecessary. Assumptions replace verification. And over time, accountability becomes conditional. What makes this case different is not that the system existed, but that it remained largely unexamined for so long. Certain incidents didn't trigger alarms. Certain financial movements weren't audited closely. Certain explanations were accepted without pressure. And that matters. Because systems don't fail all at once. They fail gradually, by allowing exceptions to become routine. The Murdaugh name didn't just carry influence, it reduced friction. It made processes smoother. It discouraged doubt. And in doing so, it created an environment where problems could persist quietly, without confrontation. This section of the case is often uncomfortable to discuss, because it doesn't point to a single villain. It points to something more difficult, structural blind spots. When trust becomes inherited rather than earned, oversight weakens. And when oversight weakens, patterns take root. By the time those patterns were finally challenged, they were already deeply embedded, not just in one family's affairs, but in the assumptions of the system around them. And once those assumptions began to break down, everything else followed. When each event in the Murdaugh case is viewed on its own, it's easy to misunderstand what was happening. A boat crashed here. There's a financial discrepancy there. An insurance settlement handled quietly. A system that seemed slow to question familiar names. But when those events are placed side by side, not emotionally, but structurally, something becomes unmistakably clear. This was not a series of unrelated problems. It was a pattern. Financial misconduct wasn't an isolated lapse. It followed a consistent method. Civil cases didn't simply create inconvenience, they threatened exposure. Institutional silence wasn't accidental. It was the product of long-standing trust that replaced verification. Each piece reinforced the next. When one safeguard failed, another compensated, until none of them did. When scrutiny appeared, it arrived late, fragmented, and often after consequences had already compounded. This is where the story fundamentally shifts. Because the Murdaugh case stops being about individual decisions and starts being about momentum. About how unresolved issues don't disappear, they accumulate. About how systems designed to protect people can unintentionally shield behavior instead. What's most striking is how visible this pattern becomes only in hindsight. At the time, each moment felt manageable, explainable, temporary. But patterns don't announce themselves. They reveal themselves only after enough data exists to connect them. And once that connection is made, it becomes impossible to ignore how much depended on silence. Silence from institutions. Silence from oversight. Silence from a system that assumed stability because it had always existed. By the time the pattern was finally broken, it had already reshaped lives, reputations, and trust far beyond one family. And yet, despite how much had surfaced, public understanding was still shaped by simplified narratives. Complex realities were condensed. Structural failures were personalized. And entire layers of accountability remained largely unexplored. Which raises an important question. Why were so many of these details minimized, or left out entirely, when the story reached the public? By the time the Murdaugh story reached streaming platforms and news outlets, it had already been condensed into simplified, digestible pieces. Documentaries focused on the dramatic moments, the murders, the trial, and the shocking verdicts. These are the parts that capture attention quickly. But in that process, entire layers of context were often minimized or omitted. Subtle warning signs disappeared, small inconsistencies in timelines, overlooked discrepancies in settlements, and civil cases that, at the time, seemed minor, but actually revealed deeper patterns. Complex relationships were glossed over, a family dynasty intertwined with the local justice system, creating blind spots that allowed misconduct to persist quietly year after year. The gradual buildup was lost. The slow accumulation of financial pressure, legal exposure, and influence manipulation that set the stage for the family's eventual unraveling. By simplifying the story, these documentaries made it easier to follow, but less accurate in showing the full scope. Viewers were left with the dramatic peak, without understanding why that peak was inevitable. This is where our video takes a different approach. Instead of condensing, we expand. Instead of dramatizing a single moment, we trace the web of interconnected factors that mainstream media rarely highlighted. Because understanding the truth isn't about the moments that shock the most. It's about the forces that allowed those moments to happen. And when those forces are laid bare, you see more than a family in crisis. You see a system tested, a community affected, and a legacy redefined. The Murdaugh case did more than shock a community. It exposed systemic vulnerabilities that had existed for decades. Legal accountability, public trust, and transparency were tested in ways few cases ever do. Civil cases and financial audits that had once been ignored suddenly gained attention. Institutions that had relied on reputation over verification were forced to confront uncomfortable truths. For the community, the impact was deeply personal. Families and neighbors watched as a name long associated with power and stability became synonymous with scandal and oversight failure. The reverberations were felt not just in courtrooms but in every corner of the Lowcountry. For the legal system, the lessons were just as significant. Oversight structures were examined. Checks and balances that had been assumed sufficient were scrutinized. And the conversation around inherited influence, the quiet power of name and legacy, was finally brought to light.
I am so sorry that I let you down. I am so sorry that I have not been able to be with you. During such hard times. I am so sorry that I did so many things that are so contradictory to every single thing Mom and I ever taught you, and Paul. I am so sorry. I am so very sorry that the things that I did and that I am pleading guilty to here today have somehow caused some people, especially people on social media, and some people in the media, to somehow believe that based on the things that I did, that it is somehow okay to make false, baseless, unsubstantiated claims against you that are not only based on no facts and no evidence whatsoever, but are also not based on any semblance of reality whatsoever. And I am so sorry that you have had to go through that. I know, Buster, that you know that I have always been proud of you. I have never been more proud of you than I am for the way that you have handled all of the adversity that I put on you. Your whole family is proud of you. Mom is proud of you, and Papa is proud of you. I see in letters, emails, and messages that people give to my attorneys how impressed people are with the way that you have carried yourself through all of this. I want you to remember that rational, reasonable thinking people never make as much noise as haters do. I want you to continue to tune them out and continue to be the bigger person as you have this whole time. I want you to continue to stay positive. And stay the course. I love you so much. And I am so proud of you. I want each of you that spoke to know that I listened to you. I heard you. Your pain and your hurt is palpable. I get it. It's reasonable. And I promise you that it resonates with me. I understand it. I hope that the time will come when you can look back and know that despite the things that I did, that I care about each one of you. Because I do. I did terrible things. Each of you placed your trust in me. I was very proud of that. And I'm still today honored by that fact that I deceived each of you. Terrible. I did terrible things. Things that thinking about right now caused me to be hurt, caused me to be disturbed. I mean, it is so important to me that you know how bothered that I am by the things that I did. And that's important to me. After hours, days, weeks, months of self-reflection, I know now that I took more and more and more pills because I was hiding, attempting to hide from the reality of the things that I was doing to all of you.
And for the Murdaugh family itself, the consequences were undeniable. Wealth, reputation, and influence that had spanned generations crumbled. Patterns that had gone unchecked for years could no longer be hidden. This case reminds us that no matter how entrenched power may appear, systems and people are accountable, eventually. And sometimes, it takes decades of subtle warning signs, hidden evidence, and overlooked scandals for the full story to emerge. The question remains, how many other stories like this exist, quietly hidden behind wealth, influence, and assumed authority? The story of the Murdaugh family is more than a tale of murder, scandal, or financial wrongdoing. It is a story about power, trust, and the fragility of systems that rely too heavily on reputation. What we've uncovered in this video, the hidden evidence, the overlooked scandals, the patterns that were invisible at first glance, shows that the collapse of a dynasty is rarely sudden. It builds quietly, layer by layer, until the foundation can no longer support the weight above it. For the community, for the legal system, and for the individuals involved, the repercussions are lasting. Transparency and accountability are no longer optional. And for everyone watching, the lesson is clear. Questions, scrutiny, and vigilance are essential, even when everything seems untouchable. As this story continues to unfold, one thing remains constant. The truth, when examined carefully, has a way of emerging, even from the shadows where it once hid. If you found this exploration insightful, and you want more deep, cinematic investigations into cases that uncover hidden truths, your support makes all the difference. Please help me reach 1,000 subscribers. Every new subscriber allows me to continue creating professional, sharp true crime documentaries. Subscribe to Dark Crime Casefiles, where no crime stays in the dark. And remember, sometimes the most important parts of a story aren't the ones on the surface, they're the secrets no one showed you.